Perceiving a black man as suspicious for possessing federal identification, failing to realize the individual he was confronting was not merely an employee, but someone wielding an authority few officers ever encounter. What commenced as a tranquil morning in an Arlington parking area would soon be immortalized on body camera for global observation. Before we proceed, please share your current viewing location worldwide in the comments and ensure you subscribe, as tomorrow's narrative is one you absolutely will not want to miss. Officer Nathan Reynolds had been diligently patrolling Arlington's corporate parks for over a decade, taking immense pride in his ability to detect questionable conduct before it escalated. However, Reynolds' professional history presented a more complex picture. Internal reports documented a pattern of stops involving young black men who had committed no transgressions, simple oversights, such as slightly misaligned parking or carrying items that, in his judgment, appeared out of place. Complaints concerning racial profiling had been lodged on occasion, though none resulted in significant repercussions. For him, suspicion was an ingrained instinct, and on that particular Tuesday morning, his body camera was actively recording as he surveyed a virtually deserted parking lot. Then he observed him, a black man approaching one of the office structures, walking with an air of confidence, a federal ID conspicuously displayed around his neck. Marcus Bennett, who was 42 years of age, carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to commanding attention effortlessly. Today he was en route to a consultative engagement at a nearby federal contractor's office, a routine task within a demanding day of instructing FBI and federal law enforcement personnel. His black briefcase swayed gently by his side, his gaze meticulously surveying the path ahead, his demeanor composed, almost unshakable. Reynolds' instincts immediately flagged Marcus as suspicious. His preconceived notions surfaced before any words were exchanged. Every stride Marcus took toward the building seemed to reinforce Reynolds' unspoken assumptions. He maneuvered his patrol car into a diagonal position behind Marcus's parked vehicle, the subtle click of his body camera activating, marking the commencement of an incident that would soon achieve viral status. "Excuse me, sir?" Reynolds' voice cut sharply across the expanse of the lot. Marcus paused, turned, and offered a courteous nod. "Good morning. How may I be of assistance?" Marcus inquired calmly, his tone measured and even. Reynolds' gaze intensified. The federal ID, glinting under the sunlight, appeared almost defiant to him, a badge he deemed incapable of being genuine. "I require your identification," Reynolds demanded, moving closer. His stance was taut, bordering on confrontational, a manifestation of years spent habitually assuming guilt in individuals who resembled Marcus. Marcus reached into his wallet, producing a driver's license alongside the federal's identification. "This is my accreditation. I am here for a meeting at the contractor's office across the lot," Reynolds stated with unwavering composure. Reynolds' skepticism showed little sign of abating. In his perception, prior experiences justified his distrust. "Are you quite certain that is authentic?" he inquired, gesturing vaguely towards the identification. The hand poised above his radio betrayed his readiness to escalate the situation if deemed necessary. From the periphery of the lot, a janitor trundled past with a cart, and a handful of employees momentarily diverted their attention from their coffee, sensing an undercurrent of tension, though uncertain of its cause. The parking lot, which moments earlier had seemed ordinary, now thrummed with a palpable silent energy. Marcus remained unfazed. Years of rigorous training had equipped him to discern body language, anticipate escalation, and maintain control. "Officer," Marcus addressed him, raising a hand slightly as he advanced a step. "Everything here is entirely legitimate. I am an instructor with the FBI. You are welcome to confirm this with dispatch if you deem it necessary." His voice was calm yet resolute, a subtle assertion of authority that stood in stark contrast to Reynolds' mounting disquiet. The camera's perspective captured every minute detail. Reynolds' jaw clenched, his eyes flickered towards the dispatcher's radio, his weight subtly shifting as he contemplated the authenticity of the identification. Marcus's composure, the ID's gleam, the distant drone of traffic the sun's reflection off the mirrored office windows, all coalesced into a silent, high-stakes confrontation. For Reynolds, this had transcended a simple identity verification. His past conduct, unsubstantiated assumptions, repeated stops of black men for minor infractions, was now poised to confront the stark reality, and Marcus, the individual he had deemed suspicious, was someone whom few in local law enforcement would ever detain without facing repercussions. Each passing second amplified the palpable tension. Reynolds' hand twitched towards the radio. Marcus's composed posture served as a subtle reminder that he might have misjudged the situation. Nearby employees discreetly shifted their gazes, some instinctively reaching for their phones as witnesses to the unfolding events. What had begun as a serene morning stroll had rapidly transformed into a scene imbued with authority, prejudice, and the potential for adverse outcomes, and the body camera meticulously documented it all: the misinterpreted signals, the ingrained assumptions, the precise moment when perception threatened to eclipse reality. Even in these initial minutes, the clash of disparate worlds was unequivocally evident. An officer whose career had been marred by questionable judgment, and a man whose professional trajectory had been defined by authority, composure, and expertise. The confrontation had, in essence, just begun. Reynolds' hand remained hovering near his radio, fingers exhibiting a slight tremor, as if the mere act of reaching could somehow validate his suspicion. His voice, firm yet strained, fractured the quietude of the Arlington parking lot. "Sir, I require you to remain precisely where you are. I am going to verify your credentials." Marcus Bennett inclined his head slightly, meeting Reynolds' gaze without an iota of anger or apprehension. "Officer, I have already presented my identification. I am an FBI instructor. I am proceeding to a meeting at the contractor's office located across the lot. You may confirm this with your dispatcher." His voice was tranquil, even-toned, and the faint metallic click of his badge against his briefcase punctuated his pronouncements. However, Reynolds appeared disinclined to listen. Years of prioritizing instinct over verifiable fact had ingrained in him a tendency to disregard explanations from individuals who did not conform to his narrow perceptions. The notion of a black man possessing a federal badge seemed improbable, almost inconceivable in his eyes. He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I require backup. I am confronting a suspicious individual, a black male, approximately in his mid-40s, attired in professional dress, potentially carrying a counterfeit federal ID. Request immediate verification." The words reverberated through the air, thick with apprehension, as a nearby janitor halted his duties mid-lot, and a few employees paused, lifting their gaze from their coffee cups. On the body camera's feed, every discernible detail was clearly visible. Marcus's steady stance, the subtle squint of the officer's eyes against the sun's glare, the prominent glint of the identification. Marcus raised a hand, a subtle gesture indicating his intention to refrain from any unnecessary escalation. "Officer Reynolds, I understand your duty, but I assure you, everything I possess is legitimate. Kindly verify through dispatch. I am fully cooperative." Reynolds' fingers tightened around the radio, his personal pride and ingrained bias colliding head-on with Marcus's unflappable composure. Within moments, 2 additional officers arrived, cautiously disembarking from their patrol vehicle. Their body language differed, conveying less rigidity and a degree of uncertainty regarding how to address the unfolding situation. They exchanged glances between Reynolds and Marcus, who continued to stand tall and composed. One of the accompanying officers, a younger patrolman by the name of Davis, murmured, "Sir, he stated he's an FBI instructor. Should we just adhere to protocol?" Reynolds interjected sharply. "He is behaving suspiciously. I insist on verification first." His tone permitted no debate, yet the unmistakable uncertainty in his eyes hinted at the nascent doubt beginning to surface. The camera meticulously recorded every subtle facial expression. Marcus's fingers calmly traced the edge of his identification. He maintained unwavering eye contact, occasionally directing his gaze towards the dispatcher's microphone, subtly asserting his authority without raising his voice. Reynolds, meanwhile, shifted his weight from one foot to the other, exhibiting impatience and a defensive posture. Employees in close proximity began discreetly retrieving their mobile phones, sensing that an unusual event was in progress. A passing vehicle momentarily decelerated, and the low hum of distant traffic subtly underscored the mounting tension. The atmosphere was remarkably quiet, almost eerily so, yet every sound seemed amplified. The shuffle of footwear, the faint click of badges, the hushed murmurs of onlookers. "Dispatch! Confirm credentials!" Reynolds reiterated, endeavoring to reassert control. Marcus remained unperturbed, repeating his instruction to verify directly with federal records. His pronouncements were precise, professional, and imperturbable, a stark contrast to Reynolds' increasingly agitated state. One of the backup officers leaned slightly toward Reynolds. "Sir, we should probably verify before proceeding with protocol," Reynolds interrupted, his voice rising just enough to attract attention. "We will handle this according to my approach first." However, the involuntary twitch in his hand, the way his eyes darted between the identification and the dispatcher radio, betrayed a growing realization that this particular stop might be escalating beyond his authority. The camera captured a fleeting expression on Marcus's face, a blend of patience and quiet authority. He harbored no anger, nor did he exhibit defensiveness. He simply comprehended the potential repercussions should the officers persist in acting upon assumptions rather than established facts. One misstep in this situation, he understood, could lead to significant ramifications for all parties involved. Minutes elapsed. Dispatch responded, their voice filtering through the radio. "Officer Reynolds, please confirm the rationale for this stop. The identification has been flagged as a federal credential. Verification is pending." Reynolds faltered. He lacked an immediate response. His assumptions, long ingrained by prior encounters with young black men and minor infractions, were now confronting an unavoidable reality. The backup officers exchanged concerned glances, recognizing that the stakes had demonstrably shifted. Marcus spoke again, his tone calm yet firm. "Officer Reynolds, I strongly advise you to verify my credentials directly with federal records. This will confirm everything instantaneously." The atmosphere seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken tension. Employees in nearby vehicles observed in silence. Even the janitor momentarily paused in his task, glancing over his shoulder. On camera, every minute detail narrated the story of authority confronting prejudice. Reynolds' tightening jaw, Marcus's unwavering composure, and the subtle repositioning of the backup officers as they weighed the legitimacy of the stop. Reynolds swallowed audibly. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his features. The words he had repeated with rote certainty, "suspicious individual," now felt inadequate, almost erroneous. The dispatcher's voice returned, maintaining a calm and neutral tone. "Officer Reynolds, you are authorized to verify credentials. Please report your findings immediately." Marcus offered a slight nod, his composed demeanor now serving as a silent assertion of control over a situation that could have devolved into a confrontation, or worse. Reynolds' chest tightened as he absorbed the reality of the situation. The individual he had arbitrarily labeled as suspicious was not merely legitimate, he was a figure of authority whom few local officers would ever have cause to interact with under such circumstances. The body camera meticulously documented every detail, the subtle gestures, the expressions on each face, and the faint ambient hum of ordinary life continuing around them. What had begun as a routine parking lot inquiry had transformed into a standoff between perception and reality, bias and professionalism, instinct and experience. And in that precise moment, all parties involved understood that the stop had in truth only just commenced, but the subsequent actions would ultimately determine whether authority, prejudice, or undeniable truth would prevail. The backup officer stood a few paces behind Reynolds, his gaze shifting nervously between his colleague and Marcus Bennett. Reynolds' jaw remained clenched, his fingers twitched near the radio, and his posture was undeniably defensive. He had been utterly convinced of his initial assessment until this very moment. Something about Marcus's profound composure, his precise movements, and the palpable aura of authority emanating from him caused the officer to hesitate. "Sir, we still need to verify your credentials," Reynolds stated, attempting to regain command of the situation. His voice, however, lacked the sharp certainty it had possessed earlier. Marcus lifted his identification slightly, maintaining an even tone. "Officer, I have provided all necessary documentation. I possess full authorization to be present here. If you contact your dispatcher or federal records, you will confirm this immediately." One of the backup officers, Davis, cast a subtle glance at Reynolds, an expression of doubt evident in his eyes. "He seems legitimate. Perhaps we should just—" Reynolds cut him off abruptly, a flicker of defensiveness crossing his face. "Follow procedure. I am in charge here." Marcus remained entirely unfazed. Instead, he began walking slowly towards the building, his hands clearly visible. He deliberately maintained his composure, his stride unhurried and non-threatening, yet imbued with an unmistakable authority, a clear signal that he was not an individual to be intimidated. Dispatch crackled over the radio once more. "Officer Reynolds, we require clarification. The individual claims to be an FBI instructor. Verify immediately." Reynolds hesitated. His internal narrative, a decade's worth of instinct-driven stops, clashed violently with the stark reality that he had detained someone whose credentials were unimpeachable. Marcus had provided him with the facts. It was Reynolds' own prejudice and assumptions that had unnecessarily escalated the situation. A subtle wave of unease washed over Reynolds' face as he glanced at his backup officers. They shifted uncomfortably, sensing the palpable miscalculation. One officer muttered, "Sir, perhaps we should just—" But Reynolds' pride seemed unwilling to allow him to concede entirely. Marcus's unwavering calmness, however, left no room for doubt. "Officer Reynolds, I suggest you verify my credentials without further delay. You will find everything to be in perfect order." Reynolds' hand moved towards the radio again, fumbling slightly as he relayed the necessary information to dispatch. The body camera meticulously captured every second of this exchange. The subtle shift in his eyes, the tightening of his jaw, the nervous glance towards the backup officers, and Marcus's unyielding composure. Within minutes, a dispatcher's voice came through with perfect clarity. "Officer Reynolds, verification confirmed. The individual is an FBI instructor authorized to be on site. Please advise on next steps." The words struck Reynolds with the force of a chilling wave. He froze, the radio still clutched in his hand. For the very first time in the encounter, the unvarnished reality forcefully shattered the lens of his prejudice. The man he had arbitrarily labeled as suspicious was not simply legitimate. He was an individual possessing an authority and expertise far exceeding anything Reynolds had conceived. Marcus did not raise his voice, nor did he gloat. He simply offered a nod, allowing the confirmed information to speak for itself. "Officer Reynolds, as you can observe, everything has been thoroughly checked out. I trust this clarifies any lingering concerns." The camera captured the ensuing silence, the subtle sigh of relief from the backup officers, the lingering tension evident in Reynolds' posture, and the quiet ambient hum of the parking lot gradually returning to its normal state around them. The body cam's perspective encompassed every detail. The sheen of perspiration on Reynolds' brow, the steady, unwavering gaze of Marcus, and the quiet hum of a parking lot returning to its normal rhythm around them. Reynolds exhaled slowly, the full weight of the realization settling upon him. He had acted solely on assumption, allowing his ingrained biases to dictate his actions. Marcus, in contrast, had remained calm, professional, and utterly resolute, demonstrating precisely the authority and knowledge that Reynolds' suspicion had sought to dismiss. "Dispatch. No further action is required," Reynolds mumbled, his tone noticeably subdued. The radio clicked off, and a palpable weight seemed to lift from the scene, although the embarrassment and the internal reckoning for the officer were only just beginning. Marcus adjusted his briefcase and resumed his walk towards the contractor's office. "I appreciate your cooperation," he said quietly, a subtle yet clear assertion that while he had remained calm, he had every right to expect professionalism in return. The backup officers exchanged glances, a mixture of relief and unease palpable. They had been direct witnesses to how swiftly a routine stop could escalate due to mere assumption and ingrained bias. The body camera would later serve as an irrefutable record of every misjudgment, every subtle manifestation of bias, and the precise moment when authority was quietly, yet unmistakably, asserted by Marcus. Even as Marcus disappeared into the building, Reynolds lingered, his gaze fixed upon the identification card that had precipitated so much unnecessary tension. This encounter would not fade from his memory easily. Internal reflection, the potential for formal complaints, and a thorough review of his actions loomed on the immediate horizon. The officer had been confronted with a rare and stark encounter with reality, one that would undoubtedly prove difficult to reconcile with years of instinct-driven judgments. And in the recesses of his mind, Reynolds harbored the certainty that this incident would not remain a quiet affair. It had been meticulously recorded, thoroughly documented, and would soon be subjected to scrutiny by superiors, colleagues, and the public alike. One simple, unfounded assumption, rooted deeply in prejudice, had nearly escalated into a career-ending mistake. The bodycam footage ultimately conveyed a narrative that extended far beyond the immediate confrontation. It served as a potent lesson in the nature of authority, the importance of composure, and the undeniable consequences of allowing prejudice to guide one's actions. By the conclusion of the encounter, it was abundantly clear that what had begun as a routine stop had evolved into an undeniable testament to accountability and unwavering professionalism, a lesson whose impact would resonate far beyond the tranquil confines of the Arlington office park. The confirmation from dispatch hung in the air, heavy and significant. Officer Reynolds' hand slowly lowered from the radio, and for the first time, he appeared fully cognizant of the gravity of his error. The individual he had erroneously labeled as suspicious was not merely a federal employee, he was Marcus Bennett, an FBI instructor with extensive experience in training law enforcement personnel across the nation. Marcus maintained his composure, taking deliberate steps towards the contractor's office, his posture unwavering. Every movement conveyed an aura of authority and self-possession. Yet Reynolds could feel the oppressive weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had allowed his personal biases to dictate his actions, thereby creating a scenario that could have escalated dramatically. The body camera captured the palpable tension, the silent acknowledgement of his mistake, and the subtle relief evident on the faces of the backup officers. "Dispatch, no further action is needed," Reynolds mumbled almost reflexively, though the words now sounded hollow. He glanced at Marcus, who met his gaze briefly, but without any trace of anger. "I appreciate your cooperation," Marcus stated, his tone firm yet courteous, serving as a poignant reminder that professionalism could command respect even in the face of unwarranted prejudice. The backup officers exhaled in unison. Davis, the younger patrolman, shook his head slightly. "I can't believe he called him suspicious. He's literally an FBI instructor," he muttered under his breath. The others remained silent, fully aware that this particular encounter would likely be a subject of discussion and review for many months to come. Reynolds' body language shifted perceptibly, his shoulders tense, his jaw tight, as he mentally replayed the sequence of events. The instant he first saw Marcus, the assumptions he immediately made, his persistent insistence on verification, all of which would have been entirely unnecessary had he approached the situation without his inherent biases. Even the most minute micro-expressions captured by the body camera clearly narrated the story of a misjudgment deeply rooted in racial profiling. Nearby employees and passers-by had gradually resumed their daily routines. A few curious glances were still cast towards the now empty space where Marcus had stood moments before. On camera, the scene depicted the ordinary world continuing its course, seemingly oblivious to the profound lesson unfolding in the parking lot. A collision of authority, assumption, and professionalism in real time. Reynolds' thoughts drifted towards the potential repercussions. Formal complaints, internal reviews, and possibly even disciplinary action could lie ahead. He had been abruptly and publicly reminded that assumptions based on race or superficial appearances were not only fundamentally unfair, but could also result in career-altering mistakes. Marcus continued towards the office building with a steady gait, his briefcase in hand. He had handled the situation flawlessly, calm, composed, authoritative, and completely in control, without unnecessarily escalating tensions. His composed demeanor had effectively diffused what could have easily escalated into a tense confrontation, powerfully demonstrating the inherent strength of professionalism over ingrained prejudice. The dashcam recording later became widely disseminated throughout the precinct, serving as an undeniable illustration of the repercussions of profiling based on race. Every sidelong look, every movement of the hands, every agonizing moment captured the clash between ingrained prejudice and objective reality. Those tasked with internal review would later document Officer Reynolds' stop, which was initiated based on unfounded assumptions. They would also acknowledge his prompt realization of the error and the commendable composure displayed by Officer Marcus as he managed the unfolding events. This represented a subtle triumph for truth, for the principle of being answerable for one's actions, and for the exercise of controlled authority. Officer Marcus' conduct transformed what could have escalated into a tense confrontation into an instructive instance of self-control, competence, and due respect for proper identification. For Officer Reynolds, it served as a sobering lesson. One must never permit conjecture to supplant verifiable evidence, nor allow personal bias to compromise professional conduct. As Officer Marcus departed the office, the final frames on the dashcam depicted the palpable discomfort that lingered. Officer Reynolds remained motionless, his fellow officers exchanged apprehensive glances, and the gentle ambient sounds of the workplace gradually reasserted themselves. The underlying message was unmistakable. This episode was not merely about verifying someone's identity. It was about the danger of preconceived notions, the insidious nature of racial prejudice, and the critical necessity of approaching every interaction with diligence and professional integrity. Even after Officer Marcus was no longer visible, the resonance of their encounter persisted. Officer Reynolds would undoubtedly carry the recollection of this stop with him, a perpetual reminder of how swiftly a prejudiced mindset can distort one's judgment. The dashcam footage guaranteed that accountability would be upheld, that there would be transparency, and that this incident would provide a valuable learning opportunity for both law enforcement personnel and the public. The parking lot had returned to its usual tranquility, yet the narrative of what transpired there had already left an indelible impression. Everyone who viewed the footage, every onlooker, would bear witness to the conflicts between bias and official power, the stark divergence between unfounded assumptions and established facts, and the irrefutable confirmation of Officer Marcus's identity. What commenced as an ordinary stop during a routine morning had evolved into a powerful testament to the capacity of professionalism to triumph over bigotry. Should you believe that professionalism and accountability should consistently hold greater sway than prejudice, we encourage you to subscribe and activate notifications. This is but a single account within a vast tapestry of experiences, each offering potential wisdom for those willing to learn.